Sorry guys, had to do that first, right? Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, it's not letting me do it on the full screen at the moment, so I'll just carry on with this just now. So,
Amanda, go to your slideshow.
I am, but it's not letting me do it. Sorry, I'm just wanting to carry on because I don't want to slow us up too much. It's not doing it for whatever reason. So I'll just move on just now. So this project is called Restoring Relationships, and it's about the recovery of love, connection and family. And the background to the project is that we spoke to a lot of carers throughout the last year and almost year and a half of the pandemic, when they had loved ones living in a care home and they were not able to see that person. And due to the restrictions, many of them didn't have any contact with their families for a very long time. And these are some of the comments that we were experiencing and hearing back from some of our carer members during different sessions that we were part of as our network. And I'll just go through some of them as well. So first of all, some people were talking about the fact that they felt like even though the person had moved into a care home, the 24/7 care had stopped within the house or the community, but it was still very much in their head, and they felt like they had handed them over to someone else, and then they were worrying about the fact that, you know, could they do things better? Were they failing in some way because they'd had to do that? A lot of people felt like there was nothing they could do, nothing was their decision anymore, they had no control. Someone said here they felt impotent and that the care had been taken away from them. And another one said at the bottom there that they felt ineffectual and that they were actually looking, they were on one of these kind of FaceTime sessions with the person, and they were living in the care home at the time, and they were on a FaceTime at home, and their loved one kept looking to the staff member for reassurance and for comfort during that time. And so for that person watching that on the other side, that really felt so painful, because they were seeing that used to be them. They said that was me, I used to be the person that they looked to for support and for comfort and reassurance, and all of a sudden there was someone else who was doing that for them. So these are just a small tip of the iceberg of some of the feelings that we were hearing about on a regular basis. And we felt that there has to be something that we can do to help families and relatives, and there has to be a way to try and restore some of these relationships. So obviously during the pandemic, families and relatives of people living in care homes experienced not only a physical but an emotional separation from each other, which was really difficult. They felt a huge disconnection of the relationship that they had with the person prior to the pandemic. They felt a huge void in their lives where all that went into loving and caring for that person used to be. And there was also a vast amount of loss and grief with no way to process it. You weren't given any support about recognising these feelings, managing these feelings, and how these feelings would progress as time went on. So again, that was kind of the background to why we wanted to do this project, because we knew that was happening. We felt that from people, we heard it from people, and a lot of you will have seen it and felt it yourselves. And also it was widely reported in the media as well about all the different experiences of people and not having that connection anymore. And so the other kind of aspect of it as well that we heard from families was the fact that in the media and the news and on TV, it was very much talked about that you were a visitor, and it was visitor status, and there was a provision of visits, and that led to a lot of families feeling that love and connection and vital care that you usually share with your relative had got lost, and that the relationships and all of your history together just somehow didn't matter anymore and didn't count anymore. And families were feeling very much left on the outside and not as involved in the day-to-day care of their loved one as they normally would have been. And it's been such a hugely complex situation. There's such a lot of strong emotions attached to it. And both families and care home staff have faced really long periods of uncertainty because nobody knew, guidance changed all the time. We weren't sure when you were going to be able to start going back into the care homes. And there was a lot of fear, stress and frustration around about that naturally. And it was a really difficult time for everyone. And you might have felt that your relationship changed with your relative who lives in a care home. And you also might have felt that the relationship you had with the care home staff might have changed over that time as well. And it might be that you're looking for support to reconnect and restore the relationships, not only with the person that you care about and the person that's your loved one, but also you may be looking for some support to try and restart relationships with staff members as well. And particularly if you have had the person that you care for move into the care home during the pandemic, you wouldn't have had the same opportunity to build those relationships with staff within the care homes as you normally would again. So it might be that you're looking for some help and support to do that. And that's really why we wanted to start this project. And so basically what happened was we went to Scottish Government with a proposal, and we were commissioned to create some toolkits to support the restoration of relationships and the recovery of love and connection in families. And what the toolkits are hopefully going to do is to, number one, and this is the most important thing, is to recognise, validate and illustrate the love and care that you'll have for each other and with each other. We hope that that'll enable you to plan your involvement in your care of that person within the care home. We hope it'll complement care plans and activity plans that are already in place, because what we don't want it to do is become a kind of blame and shame tool that basically you can use to say to care home staff, this is what you're not doing. It's very much designed to be something that works in partnership and gives you that equality and really recognises the contribution that you make to the person that you care for. We're hoping that it also is flexible and adaptable as the person's needs change. So over time, particularly if it's a person with dementia, that person's condition will deteriorate over time. So the relationships toolkit will hopefully be flexible enough to help you through and manage through those different changes. We're hoping it'll act as a bridge between care home staff, families and relatives, and really help to facilitate some quite important and sometimes quite difficult conversations at times. And it's also in a two-phased kind of aspect of the project, and we're hoping that the second phase will help families and relatives in the future, and I'll talk a bit about that towards the end of the presentation. And so when we were commissioned to do the project, we set up a steering group that was a mixture of, we had both families and relatives who had someone living in a care home at this point in time and had experienced that whole transition through the pandemic. And we also worked in partnership with Scottish Care to speak to care home staff and managers as well, because it was really important that we spoke to both parties and got perspectives from both of those parties who were really kind of living through this really difficult time. Because also what I was worried about was that if we created the toolkits and we didn't involve staff and care home managers, that then when it came to the point of you guys as families using the toolkits or asking for them to be implemented, that might become a barrier there because they weren't involved in it from the very beginning. So it was really important to get their perspective and their viewpoint as well. So the steering groups helped to shape the project, and then we also did lots of consultation. We did focus groups with families and relatives, and again with care home staff and managers, and we also did some surveys as well online so that everyone had an opportunity to contribute to the toolkits, and all of the content of the toolkits and everything that's encased within them, it comes directly from families and relatives and care home staff and managers themselves. They created what it should look like and what it should feel like for each of them. So we created two toolkits. So as you can see here on the left hand side, the purple one we created for families and relatives, and then we did a separate one, which is the green one on the right hand side, which is for care home staff, managers and providers. And the reason we did that was because, again, we felt that some of the aspects of the toolkits are similar in both cases, but there's also some very different areas that are covered in the toolkits, and it was really important, I think, to give each party their own version of the toolkit so that they could use it in the best way possible. And so today I'm going to touch on the one that we did for families and relatives and take you through a little bit of what that contains and give you a flavour of what's involved in it. And then I'll also make sure at the end that you get links to our website where you can download both copies of the toolkit so you can see what's involved in both of them and hopefully help you to use them going forward. So this is the kind of overview of what's in the toolkits. And the middle one is the most important one, and that's the family involvement plan, and I'll go into that in more detail in a wee second. And that's the kind of key core part of both toolkits, and that's really what we wanted to create based on feedback that we got from families and relatives. We're also going to help you in the toolkit to create safe spaces and also to have safe conversations as well, because that's really important given all the changes that have happened over the last year. We've included in there some activities because we know that at this point in time, and probably for a little bit longer, that some of the visiting times that you have are shortened down. So sometimes people are only getting in, sometimes it could be half an hour, sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it can be 4 hours. So if you're in for a shorter amount of time at the moment and you're maybe not sure about what you can do in a shortened amount of time, we've spoken to some experts about some really great shortened activities that you can do with someone. But also just in general, if you feel maybe a wee bit anxious, because a lot of families we're talking to is about feeling anxious about starting to see the person more regularly again if they hadn't done for over a year, and maybe their dementia had deteriorated to a certain point and they weren't sure how to reconnect to that person. And a lot of people were really nervous about getting that time back and then knowing what to do within that time. So again, in the toolkit, we've given you lots of hints and tips about ways to try and reconnect those relationships if you're feeling anxious. We've also spoken in quite a lot of detail about managing feelings of unresolved grief and loss, because that whole situation over the last year of not being able to see someone and having that physical separation and not being able to have that same connection and relationship is a natural trigger for lots of feelings of grief and bereavement, because it's such a hugely complex issue, and you might not have recognised that in yourself. You might have just been feeling really angry, or you might have been feeling really sad, or you might have been just feeling something that you can't quite put your finger on. You don't know why you feel the way that you feel. And 9 times out of 10, that'll normally be because the situation has kicked off a cycle of grief and bereavement, even though the person's still alive. And it's very confusing sometimes, because a lot of people will say to you, well, they're still here and you can still try and connect with them, and don't really understand why that's happening, and you yourself might not understand where those feelings are coming from. So in the toolkit, we've kind of spoken about the different parts of that and how those triggers will start, and also given you some hints and tips on how to manage those feelings if you are struggling with that. And another aspect that we've included in there is a going home checklist as well, because a lot of families were talking about starting to go back into care homes, starting to see their relatives again, but then maybe the visits weren't always the way they expected them to be, because obviously starting back up those relationships again after not seeing somebody for a long time, and sometimes maybe getting a shock about potentially how much somebody might have deteriorated or how different that relationship might be, meant that when they were coming away from the care home, they had a lot of, again, emotions and a lot of feelings that they weren't sure how to deal with. So this is just a wee kind of checklist that you can go through to just take a couple of minutes, 5 or 10 minutes once you've come away from the care home, just to sit and think about that visit, what's gone well, what's not gone well, and just work through those emotions and through those feelings as well, just to kind of help you kind of reset a bit. And there's a couple of different hints and tips around about little activities that you can do yourself for a bit of self-care and self-compassion, just to kind of help you yourself manage through all those feelings. So that's a kind of rough overview of what's in those toolkits, and that's a kind of idea for you about what might be there for you and what might be helpful. But the thing that I wanted to just cover in a bit more detail is the family involvement plan, and I'll go into that in a wee second for you. And the reason the family involvement plan is important is because that even before the pandemic happened, the decision for a loved one to move into a care home was probably one of the most difficult decisions that you ever have to make. And it's always filled with lots of guilt and worry about whether or not that was the right thing to do. And I think there's probably not one of us that hasn't experienced a loved one tell us at some point in their life, please don't ever put me in a care home. And then if that does come to that point in that decision, that's always in the back of your mind, and you always hang on to that and think, I can't do that because they told me not to do it. And so it becomes a really difficult decision process, and it does start to trigger off a lot of feelings of grief and bereavement, because a lot of people see that as a huge significant change in that person's life and in your life as well. And once the person moves into care, if you think about that first quote that one of our carers talked about, saying that even though the 24/7 care has finished, that's always still in your mind. And a lot of people make that assumption and say to you, oh, well, now they're in a care home, you don't need to worry anymore. That's all your worries over. You can just sit back and relax because someone else is there to take care of the person. But actually, a lot of the times you might be thinking all of these questions. So questions that you might think about, well, where do I fit in now? What's my role? What's my purpose now? Because that's talking about that void that's suddenly there. Because if you've been doing the majority of that care and role 24/7, then suddenly there's a massive void and there's nothing for you to do anymore in that sense. So you think, well, how do I fit in? What do I do now? Where do I belong? Can I still be part of their life? And it's really difficult because it's no longer your house or their house. You're talking about a care home, which is a different, environment, and you aren't in control of any of that. So it's really unsettling for families and relatives to know what to do in those situations. And again, when we were talking to carers through the consultation phase of this, a lot of people spoke about, and one lady in particular was talking to me, and she said that she viewed the care when she moved into a care home as shared care, and she wanted it to be a shared care. And she said, I want to be included and not excluded. And that's really the basis of this toolkit and why we wanted to do the project. So we really wanted to find a way to encourage that shared care that recognises and values what you as families and relatives contribute to the care of your loved one. And it's all those little extra things that you do with or for that person. A lot of families, when we're doing the consultation phase, spoke about all the additional little things that they would do, because to me that's true person-centred care, because that's coming from a place of love, and you're doing that for the person because you love them. So again, as I said, if your family members moved into a care home during the pandemic and you've not been able to interact with staff as you normally would, it's really important to give you a way to start to think about how you want to be involved and document that down somewhere and have it as a tangible piece of evidence that you contribute to the care of that person, and that should be an equal part of any care plan or any care of that person going forward. And also that it'll really just help staff, it'll complement what they do, and it'll help them provide a kind of really great standard of care for that person, because your care and contribution is part of that as well. And so that's where the family involvement plan came from, and that's one of the key parts of the toolkit. And this is the first page of it. It comes in 2 pages within the toolkit, and basically, as I said, it's hoping to recognise your shared history and the importance and the quality of the value of the care that you give. It should enable you to plan and begin conversations about ways that you want to be involved. Now, you might have been involved really heavily in the care of the person before the pandemic, and obviously due to the restrictions, a lot of that will have been stopped or reduced down to probably half of what it used to be. So as the pandemic hopefully comes to an end and lockdown restrictions ease and you find yourself being able to be in the care home more, then it's about how do you start those conversations back about what you want to be doing with that person, how do you want to be involved, and we've said there it can be in terms of how often you want to be there, how many hours you ideally would like to be there, what are the key tasks or activities that you want to do. But it's also about thinking from your own perspective. It's a way to mark down there what's important to you, why is it important to you to be able to do these things, what will it do for you, for your mental and physical well-being, to be able to be part of that care. And it also helps you to talk about the best ways to involve you in the care, and also just giving the staff those kind of hints and tips about the best ways to communicate with you. And also, for example, some of our families that we spoke to said, I would just be really happy if the staff would just tell me the truth. So even if it's something bad that's happened or something that's they feel is really sad news that they have to give to me and they're frightened to tell me, it's actually just be better if they're really honest and just tell me up front. So you can put that in the family involvement plan. You can tell them about the best ways to let you know something, the best ways to communicate with you, and just all round just a way of capturing what you want to contribute to that person. And it can be as involved as you want or need it to be. So it's just your choice. You put down there what you want to do. And you can also include other family members as well, so that everyone within the family group is getting an opportunity to have that there. And that should then be part of the person's care plan. And it should be something that is there and used as an opportunity to have different conversations between you and staff members who work in the care home. And we hope it's just a really great way to kind of manage those feelings that start to come up when the person moves into a care home. And I'm hoping that you agree with that, and that it'll be something that you find useful, and we can have a chat about it later on about whether or not your feelings on it and what you think about it. And just the last little bit there is just to kind of give you a kind of review again. That's all the kind of things that we have in the toolkit. I don't have time to go into everything in detail today, but in terms of next steps, what we'll do is we'll give you the link to our website where you can download the toolkits. I've also got hard copies available as well, so if anybody would like hard copies of the toolkit sent out to them, again, if you email me and give me your address, I can arrange them to be sent out to your home for you. Use the plan as and how it suits you. There might be aspects of the toolkit that you don't think are applicable to you, or you might have already done them in the past, or it might be all of it's useful to you. It's one of those things that just needs to be used as efficiently for you as possible. So just use what you need, and if there's bits of it that you don't find useful, then just leave them, just dip in and out of it as you see fit. And also try and encourage other family members to get involved as well. So again, you can give them links to download their own version of the toolkits, or you can share it with them and use it again to have those conversations amongst yourselves as families as well about how you want to be involved in the care of the person living in a care home. We are going to be hopefully releasing some online learning sessions round about the toolkits in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be doing certain sessions for family members for their toolkit, but we'll also be doing training sessions for the care home staff and managers as well to help them to implement the toolkits. And there's also the option there as well, if you would like us to come and do either information sessions about the toolkits, if maybe you're part of a carers group or a carer centre, or you know of any other colleagues or kind of links that you might want us to go and speak to them about the toolkits, then again, if you just email me, I can arrange to go and do that for you online. And it'd be really great if you could just share information and links about the toolkits as widely as possible, just to get the awareness out there amongst carers and families that the toolkits are available, and hopefully help them with those relationships. And finally, the last part of the project is that it's a two-phase project. So the toolkits we've created at the moment are for families who are currently experiencing a loved one living in a care home. But as I said before, we knew that before the pandemic, that whole transition from the community into care was a huge area that, again, I don't think there was much support there, and lots of families were telling us that they really struggled with that decision and that whole process. So the next phase of the project will be to look at the toolkits just now, to evaluate how well they're working, and then to create a new amended version, which will be for families who are just at that decision point. So if you are living in the community at the moment and the person you care for is about to move into care, then we're wanting to create a second toolkit which will help you start to plan that involvement and also manage your feelings around about that decision at the very beginning. So I'm looking to start consulting on that over the next couple of weeks. So it'd be really great if any of you would like to get involved in that, if you'd like to share your experiences or help me to look at what might be helpful in the content of that. If you think back to the point where that decision was key for you, I'd be really interested to have that involvement. So again, if any of you want to give me an email if you'd like to be involved, that would be really great, and I'll get back in touch with you and see how we can take that forward. Thank you. And sorry my slides weren't working correctly. I hope everyone could see them okay. And what we'll do is, as we do with all the webinar sessions, we'll have handouts that come out when we're finished our final one at the end of this month, which will have all of the slides that we cover in any of the sessions, and also any of the kind of hints and tips and useful links as well. So you'll be able to look back over it in the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Amanda. That was a great presentation and a fantastic resource. Really good to hear all about it, how it came about, and how people can be supported to use it. So yeah, I hope you all found that really interesting and helpful. I'm now going to invite Lorna Hart-Thompson to join us. Lorna works for Alzheimer Scotland in our new Action on Rights team, and she's going to tell you a little bit about their work and how that team's developed as well. So welcome, Lorna. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks very much for inviting us along. Just a bit of background, I have worked with Alzheimer Scotland for over 8 years as a dementia advisor within North Lanarkshire, and over the last year, as you can imagine, has been the hardest year, with nearly every single person that we have came in contact with reaching crisis. So the level of emotional distress that families have went through in the last year has been nothing like what it's been the last 8 years. And for Alzheimer Scotland as an organisation, there's dementia advisors in each area, and every single staff member saying the exact same thing. And rewind back to July, I remember getting a lady who came to us querying about visiting her husband in a care home. And at that point, we were like, I can't believe this is the situation we're in. The doors are shut. We can't get a wife and a daughter to visit at the same time. Something needs to be done about this. We need to reconnect families together. And it was the guidance at that point, you could have one designated visit. So unfortunately for that lady, she could only visit on her own, but she struggled with that. She struggled to see the deterioration in her husband. She struggled emotionally. She had that level of guilt there, because unfortunately for her, like many others, care home was never, ever in the plan. It was never going to be like the future plan. It was never going to be the kind of a resting place. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic, that was the result. So she had nobody to support her and her family to sit through that visit, and even just going to kind of support her emotionally, sit there, hold her hand, you know, have a wee bit of a debrief when they come back out, and most importantly to give her a hug at the end of it. So what we then had done through that, we had the conversation, and there was loopholes in the guidance. So the open care guidance had obviously come out much later, but in the earlier days we were able to support her to get essential visit status, and that meant that her as the wife could visit, but also she could be supported by her daughter. So fast forward into 2021, and the open care guidance had came out, and it was very kind of a, you can get this, you can be a designated visit. But action rights team were formed, and very quickly we seen that there was total variation in that guidance and the implementation of what that said. So I'm just going to share, I've only got 5 kind of slides on a PowerPoint, and it's to keep me on track rather than me running away in a tangent, because for folk that know me in the call, I do like to go off in a tangent. So these are to keep me in line, and then I'm open to kind of a conversation and questions, because we're a new team, and it's great to hear people's experiences. So just a second, we'll get these slides up. Can everybody see that? Yeah.
Yep, thanks Lorna, I can see that.
Thank you. So we were formed in the end of February. The open care guidance came out, and our team was formed. It's a very small team. All of us, bar one, has worked with Alzheimer Scotland for a length of time, and we've been working in local areas. So we then had to quickly adapt into finding out what was happening nationally across the board. So we sit alongside the Dementia Helpline. So the first port of contact, anybody living with someone in a care home would contact our 24-hour Dementia Helpline. The helpline staff then report to the action rights team, and we then allocate the calls that's coming in. And at first we didn't really know, because as a dementia advisor we're dealing with complex cases every day, but we didn't really know what was different about this type of referral. But very, very quickly we got what the aims of the project were. So we're funded by Scottish Government to help anyone within a Scottish care home. So as much as we're Alzheimer Scotland, we're working with people with learning disabilities, we're working with younger people as well as older adults. And the main aims is to ensure meaningful contact was resumed. That was it, simple as that, however very complex as you will understand. And to help families get that better information to what does the guidance mean? And for those that's on the call that's seen the guidance is changing constantly. So it was our job to make sure that we knew exactly what that guidance said and how we can then help families make those informed decisions. And the bottom line of this is to help the communication and the conversation between families and care homes. So over the first 3 months, we had like over 130 direct referrals. Now, in the first weekend, we weren't really sure what the demand would be. Hence the reason it was a seconded post for 3 months with the extension to 6 months if there was a need for it. And over the first weekend, we get 27 referrals. So for us, we realised that this was going to be quite a busy, demanding role, because people were telling us that the guidance had so many loopholes in it that care homes were just saying no. So we wanted to make sure that we were reaching as many people as we possibly can, because unfortunately for us, the only people that really know that the action rights team is there is people that's on social media or are digital included. So we're striving to get that information, that knowledge about the action rights team out to the wider community. So there was a drive that every single resident should get a letter, every single family member should be informed. However, you can understand the issues around that. Some care homes did not tell people that we were there for whatever reasons that may be. So for our team, we made sure we were kind of getting out and about to make sure that people and families knew that our service was there to increase that meaningful contact. So that's just a bit of the background of what we've been doing over the last 3 months to make sure families knew that we were there for that type of support. Really quickly, the guidance says one thing, however, in practice, it was very, very different. And this is where families were calling the helpline, coming through the action rights team, and they were angry. understandably so. So the emotion behind those calls made the calls really lengthy. And the visit might have been the issue, but it was the icing in the cake. It was that kind of we hadn't seen that family member for such a long period of time. The emotional distress about how do we deal with the deterioration in somebody? How do we cope with that feeling of loss? And ultimately it wasn't within our control as family members. So when the families were phoning in, we really quickly realised that the variation of the implementation interpretation of the guidance was apparent. And what we then did with families is we read the guidance as a family member, but then we also read the guidance as a care home manager, and you can see how the differences were apparent. So it was up to us to try and find out, how do we meet families in the middle? How do we meet care home managers in the middle? And the only way we could do that was keeping talking to families, keeping talking to care home managers, finding out where the issues lay. There were some cases where the care homes were just creating their own guidance. There was private care homes that were saying we don't answer to Scottish Government, so it doesn't really matter what is in the guidance, we're doing our own thing. Care home were only meeting sometimes the minimal requirements. So again, the guidance came out at the end of February. We're now sitting in June and still care homes are not meeting the minimal. So that's a challenge for us and for the family members who are so desperate to see their loved ones in a care home. The other issue we have is that it seems to be now the care homes are waiting for new guidance to come out, but the world is moving forward, so should care homes be. So we've been in calls with Care Inspectorate, Scottish Government, Scottish Care, and every single person is wanting the same. We're wanting this visit to happen. However, we're still hearing some care homes are saying, oh, we're waiting for new guidance, but ultimately there is not going to be any more guidance. There might be updates, but there's a timeline there with no times on it, and that was to give the care home managers the autonomy to open up when they deemed that were confident to do so with the right risk assessments in place. So part of our work is to share that good practice, because believe you me, there is a lot of great work out there in care homes. However, we're only hearing the negative stuff through the Action and Rights team. And then there was other additional restrictions like the use of full PPEs. We were hearing that people had to wear full suits head to toe. We were hearing that people still had to sit 2 meters apart, and really strict time limits. In some cases, we were finding that people had to meet in pods. Now that isn't what the guidance says. So we're educating and trying to educate not only families on what the guidance says, and 100% of the people that's phoning the Action Rights team, they know what the guidance say. They are mainly looking for reassurance to then challenge the care home on that fact, or whatever the case may be. They're trying to get access, whether it's more frequent visits or more visitors into the care home. So they're the strict limitations that families are hearing every single day. But we know that there's care homes out there that are running with this guidance. They've got really meaningful contact happening. They've got more than one family member coming in. It is back to as close to what normal used to feel like for some care homes, but there's still some at the other end of the spectrum that is so resistant to change. And that's when our partnership approach with Care Inspectorate, Scottish Care, the Scottish Government really kind of takes note. So we did, and I'm just noticing that the wording of that is quite blurry there. So as part of our, just as Amanda was saying, to really get that balanced approach, we then hosted engagement sessions for families, for staff, and also for residents. And I must say the residents one gave us an absolute hoot, because some people in the care homes were just happy that they were getting a drink in the evening. So when we're hearing from the families that's coming through the Action and Rights team, 100% of them are wanting to bang down the doors to get in to see their loved ones. However, when we're speaking to the family or the resident and the loved one in the care home, some people are just like happy that they're safe. And this is true quotes from different people. Some residents are saying it was ridiculous. They didn't really see what the measures were necessary because it was so strict. We asked people, did they feel that they were listened to, and they laughed and says absolutely not, because we would have been seeing our loved ones in our own rooms, never mind through a window. When we said, look, what do you hope for the future? Are you worried? Because there's that kind of a sense of concern, worry, residents might be worried about going into the community. They said absolutely not. They can't wait to go to like the seaside, or one guy said that he wanted to go to the pub because that's where he wanted to go. And a lot of residents were telling us that they really just wanted to see their grandkids, and the fact that they were not allowed to visit is just ridiculous. So we're listening to so many people to try and get that balanced approach. And ultimately from family members, they're feeling that they didn't want to rock the boat. So when people are coming to us, we're saying, why have you waited so long to come to Action and Rights? And they say, because I'm terrified of the level of care deteriorating for mum, but it's got to the point where the care home's not listening. And again, we're not looking at that blame situation. But one family member did tell us after they had got in contact with Action Rights, the care home manager put their hands up and said, we don't have time to keep reading through this updated guidance. And once that family member educated the care home manager, they were then able to get essential visits with not only the lady herself, but with other family members, including grandchildren. So is that point where you think they should just know because it's their job to know? But we're living in a world where there's so many additional tasks for the care home to do. But ultimately, if we can work together, we can hopefully achieve that much more meaningful contact. And then there was the staff member who used to be an activity coordinator who got changed to be the LFT checker. So she was taken away. So the stimulation for the residents group just wasn't there. And she was so aware that the deterioration that was happening within the care home, but ultimately that was her job changed for that period of time. And just the last one there, that was the lady I was talking about. She had contacted the Action Rights team. She knew what the guidance said. She came to us for a bit of reassurance. She went back to the care home manager and it was agreed that she would have essential visit status, which was brilliant because for her, she needed to spend that time with Dad because he had deteriorated and she was absolutely entitled to essential visit status. And that's our contact details there. So you can contact us, you come through the helpline first and then one of the team would call you back, because I hope people will understand that these calls are lengthy. So if you call, it might be that the team might only have 5 minutes, but then when we contact you, we agree a time that we've got much more time to talk through situations, because we're finding through the conversations, initially people are angry, understandably so, but through that call they end up having an action plan that they feel confident, they feel empowered to then have the conversation with the care home and positive outcomes have reached. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen there. And basically when we out the numbers that we were talking about, so we've had over, I think to date now it's like 145 referrals came through. There is only 20 cases where we're still ongoing. And it is like we're reaching stalemates between care home managers and family members. What we're finding from those 20 is there is potential adult support and protection cases in place through family members really keen to see, but there's been things that's happened that we're not in control of. Other issues are that the care home, that particular area, so that the area is in maybe a higher level than what previously was. So for instance, one area is not allowing in-car journeys, so the person is not allowed to go out to the family member's home or to go to the seaside or to go to the pub, but people are seeing that in social media that's happening in other places. So part of our job is to contact public health, to contact care inspector to find out the reason why. And the transmission rate can be traced back to in-car journeys in that particular area, and that's why that person in that care home's decided that they're not allowing that at the minute. So if care home managers and families had all that information, we wouldn't need necessarily Action Rights. We wouldn't need to have restoring relationships, because we would have that communication. But unfortunately, in a world where sometimes we do need a little extra support and we do need a bit extra kind of a guidance, and if we can take some of that stress and emotional distress away from the family, then we'll do that. But it is really about that, just as Amanda was talking about, this restoring relationship, breaking down barriers, increasing that good positive communication. And I'm not sure, there's a few activist groups for care homes and care home relatives, and what we see on it is, oh well, that's it, I'm just got to get Action Rights to fight my battles. And really, I don't know where people get this impression that we're big, like strong, angry argumentative people. It's like, we're all about that kind of a positive conversation. So when we talk to families, it is truly about how can we reach that compromise? What's the meaningful thing to you? And just one of the anecdotal stories, we had a family of 4 daughters, and I'm for a family of 4 daughters, and they all wanted access to the mum. And they were all phoning us at different times, really angry. So then we spoke to the mum, because she still had capacity. She didn't have a diagnosed dementia. And she says, see the lasses, they need to give that staff member a break. As long as somebody takes me out for a fag, that's what she says, as long as somebody takes me out for a fag, I'm quite happy. So when we went back to the family members and said, unfortunately, you're getting 2 visits a week, that's what they're saying. You've also got your garden visits, but your mum's quite happy. That's what's truly meaningful to your mum. So action rights almost ask you, what's meaningful to you? And if we're going to go into battle, which people think that that's what we're there for, it's getting what's the biggest fight, what means the most to you, and that's how we manage to reach compromise. And just more recently, I've been sharing the toolkits that Amanda shared there, because if we've never lived in somebody else's shoes, we don't truly know. And we had one care home manager who was just absolutely not for moving, until unfortunately a family member of hers ended up in hospital after a heart attack. And she was not allowed access in the hospitals. And she very quickly changed her tune when we then spoke to her. So it is just trying to understand what people are experiencing. And if we don't understand, then we're trying to listen and learn. So that's me, but I'm happy for conversation, question, chat. But I'll hand back over to Amanda and Gillian. Thank you.
That's great, thank you, Lorna, and that's really useful information about that service, because again, I don't know if everybody always knows that it's available. So I'll also include all the links to accessing the helpline and everything that Lorna's spoken about in your emails that I send you back, with the links for the recordings and the toolkits. And again, if there's anyone that you think might benefit from contacting the helpline, then please just pass that on, or yourself, if you feel like you might want to contact the helpline, please go ahead and do that and get that support, because it's there for you. Okay, so we're now going to move on to Des, who has very kindly come along today to share his experience about caring for his wife, and hopefully you'll find this a really helpful part of our webinar, because it's listening to someone who has lived it and who has had that experience. And also Des was really keen to give some reflections on things that have helped him, or things that he thinks might help you in the future as well. So that'll, you know, hopefully lead in nicely to some of the hints and tips that we want to kind of share with each other. So we'll hand over to Des just now, and then after that we can have a chance to maybe have a bit more of a chat, and if there's any kind of questions for any of the speakers, including Des, then please feel free, or if as you're going through, just type it in the chat box if you think about something, and I can bring it up at the end. So Des,
thank you. Thanks for the chance to talk about the impact of COVID in care homes. When I saw the email came out, and I thought, well, I could actually make a difference here, I think, and hopefully you'll be the judge of that. But my wife was officially diagnosed in autumn 2016. There'd been several years of change and decline, and the one thing that she did keep almost to the very end was a wicked sense of humour, which was handy living with me. One piece of great advice I had was from my GP early on after Alison had been diagnosed. She described it as a marathon. Caring is a marathon, and you have to be ready to flag up when you hit that wall. Now, you can probably tell by the shape of me, I've never actually run many marathons in my time. I've eaten a few, but I've not run any. But that's vitally important as a carer, that you don't overstretch yourself, you don't commit to too much, and you seek out the help when it's there, if it's available. Both myself and my wife had been in professional roles during our careers. We had vital support at home from my son and my daughter. They were absolutely fantastic, and they are adults in their 20s. So I'd cared for Alison for about just less than 2 years at full time, but on and off for years before that as well, and retired from teaching by cutting back my hours and realising that my time was best spent elsewhere, to be perfectly honest. And when I was caring for her at home, it was difficult. I mean, there's no question that it's difficult. What I'd hope to do is identify some of the issues that I found as a carer that were important, and what worked and what didn't, really. That's what I'm trying to get across. Alison was taken in for a 6-week assessment in the hospital, followed by entry to the care home 2 days before they locked down on the 13th of March last year. Must say that both the hospital and the care home were fabulous. The care that Alison got, the professionalism, the staff, just wonderful. And there's no question that that was partly due to Alison, because of her personality, because she was a fun-loving person, because she was warm, she was very sociable. That helped, because obviously you get that connection there at a personal level, and as I say, the staff were fabulous in both the hospital and in the care home. But they're not family. I mean, the staff there are not family. They don't have that wealth of stories and connections and history, and they're not staffed. That either the hospital or the care homes are not staffed to replace family. So despite, after March last year when Alison went into the care home, despite weekly WhatsApp calls to see how she was doing, I quickly realised that it was like making me manage those pangs of guilt, which, perfectly normal, perfectly acceptable, but Alison was getting too confused. She could hear my voice, but she couldn't understand why I wasn't in the room with her, and where this voice was coming from or whatever. So the question I've kind of left there is, who benefited? Well, I did, because I saw her, live on a screen, but I didn't because I wasn't able to, as Lorna's just been going through. For lots of people, that inability to go into the care home and see the person and touch the person and hold their hand and reassure them and kiss them and all the rest of it, that was missing. So what complicated things there as well, Alison developed COVID in the care home last May. They tried their best. As I say, the care was fabulous, but they tried their best to minimise the spread and all the rest of it. So Alison, with fairly advanced Alzheimer's at that stage, was in isolation. Now, that wasn't ideal, far from ideal, but so many people were in similar situation. Now, as of the end of June last year, when the lockdown was eased, we started getting either garden visits, if there was more than one person additional to me visiting. If I was going in on my own, which I tried to do once a week for half an hour, we met in the care home conservatory, but there was still that physical gap. I wanted to reach over and hold her and tell her I loved her and all that, and I wanted her to feel that she hadn't been forgotten about. That was vital for me and for her. I could tell her that, but of course, it's not the same if you say something to somebody. It's like these calls. You can say something, but having that physical contact with somebody is just so vital. There was a gentle but marked decline in her by the autumn. She was in a wheelchair by then. If you remember last summer as well, the weather wasn't as nice as it's been recently. So we were often going in, some of our friends were going in with me to sit in the garden with her for half an hour. And she was soaked. I mean, she was going back inside quite wet. And so were we. It was no bother to me at all, because I wanted to see her. That was the most important thing for me, but it certainly wasn't ideal. So she, as I say, she was in a wheelchair by then, and increasingly over the autumn period, she was sleeping while I was talking to her, and that's again a progressive, advanced stage of dementia. Although at the time I was thinking nothing changes. As soon as I speak, she falls asleep. There was, she had years of practice in that one. In terms of what worked and what didn't for me, I've got to start off with the positives. I like to do that anyway. We had excellent support in our local council and local NHS board from the different consultants, from occupational therapy, from speech and language, from the community psychiatric nursing team. God bless them, they were fantastic. The rapid response teams, when they got involved, because I started to struggle. I mean, caring for somebody who is no longer responding to you, no longer no longer able to understand or process information or make decisions for themselves, or even indicate how they feel. That they were a godsend. I mean, one example of the caring situation was that in December 2019, Alison hadn't been to the toilet for 24 hours. Now, as a bloke, I'm like, well, that's not good, because I've got to go every 20 minutes, right? So trying, my son and daughter involved in that as well, we were trying to get her to sit on the toilet and perform. And our mind had just become so confused as to what she was, her signals were just all mixed up and whatever. So to take her in, I mean, I phoned the Dementia Helpline, Alzheimer Scotland, and they said, get her in the hospital beds, take her in. And again, the hospital was superb, and she had a catheter fitted, which complicated things for her. And that was just shortly before she went into the hospital for the assessment. But that was when I realised, you know, that I had hit that wall. When it comes to catheters, I mean, it's like, well, what did I do? I mean, anyway, so wonderful support and advice from Alzheimer Scotland in the Edinburgh service. They were fantastic. So many superb volunteers and the regular staff, and they, you know, throughout Alison's journey, they'd been there for her with a wide range of activities, endless amounts of patience and care. Not so excellent support from social work, it has to be said, laughably poor. I remember the old report cards used to get home with the 5 standards, really good, down to, you know, kick up the backside. It was kick up the backside territory for them. And I've got friends who are social workers, and they were horrified by the lack of care and professionalism shown. And that's important. If you're in a situation where you have not had to decide on, made the decision on care homes yet for your loved one, it's something to take into account. Is if you've got connections, if you know someone who's in social work or whatever, sound them out. If you have got people who have got friends or family in care homes, speak to them, and obviously get help from Tide or from Alzheimer Scotland or whoever as you need to, because that's tremendously important. What I've written down is if you need to use your favourite size 9 steel toe-cap boots for the meetings from time to time. One of the things that was recommended for Alison was that she went into by social work. She went into basically a holding area for younger people with long-term injuries. That was one of their suggestions, and it was just so inappropriate for a woman in her 50s who was dignified and kept her, her integrity and all the rest of it. But to put her in with, bless them, people who had been in motorbike accidents or people with all sorts of long-term care issues was just highly unsuitable. So fight your corner. That's really important with social work. Plus the whole rigmarole with financial assessments. I had some that were lost in the post. Emails were never received, apparently. Just a horror story with social work. So be prepared to do some battles there. And if you can't fight those battles on your own, and it's perfectly acceptable to accept that you might not be able to, get somebody else to help you. Lorna might be a good idea, but you've got a fair choice around the table here to choose from. When it came to actually looking for a care home, again, social work were no use, because they say, well, it's your decision, it's up to you, you go away. So being a kind of organised retired teacher, I got the old spreadsheet out and Googled care homes in my area, used the rating system, made a list of 10, visited most of them before the lockdown occurred. And it's just incredible. Some of them were tremendous places. Some of them are just really, really, you walk in, it's like walking into somebody's home. You get that impression that the people in here are well loved and well looked after. Others had grand pianos at the door. Now, I'm sorry, but that's not anywhere I've lived. There's not been any grand pianos. If I wanted to live like Elton John, it'd be, well, anyway. I kept a simple rule when it came to visiting the care homes. would Alison like it here? Kept it very simple. Could you fit in? Would you like it? And as I say, she was always very engaging, and she would laugh, and she still had that kind of ability to do that at that stage. But as a carer, I would strongly urge you to lift your head over the parapet and take stock when you can. And it's not easy, and I know, and I can say I've been there, I've done it, and it's really difficult some days. You won't be able to do this every day, but from time to time, you need to lift your head over and seek advice and help. Grab respite if you can. Again, dealing with my famed colleagues in social work, that wasn't forthcoming. Alison was under 65, so there was very little provision for her in care homes, let alone through normal respite channels. So I had to become effectively a one-person tag team. You're thinking, you're planning, you're acting for 2 people or more. You can't do it all. Plus, you've got a moving target. Dementia's changing, and the person that's experiencing dementia is going through a long-term decline, and that long-term decline can sometimes display itself. How shall I put this? You can see, sometimes you see the changes yourself day to day. Sometimes you don't see the wood for the trees, or the trees for the wood. I never know which way to do that one. But anyway, the decline is where family and friends come in, because they'll see, if they're not visiting every day, they'll see the changes and be able to, help with that as well. But a key point for me is, as a recovering carer, you have got to stay strong. You've got to care of yourself, take care of yourself too. Self-care for carers is, I think it's absolutely vital. If you can't care for yourself, you can't care for the person. It's your responsibility. And at the same time, and hopefully I'm going to be very sensitive here, but it's very tough for you as carers now. It's even tougher when they're not there. And coming to terms with Alison's death, she died last December, hugely difficult. She was neither in the hospital or the care home for her final year, but I don't think about that as her not being here. I still think of, because I was able to go to her daily in the hospital, or every few days in the hospital, and the same initially in the care home, it's like, where is she? And it's that so where you have a chance to enjoy and celebrate every day, take it. Something will have been said, something will have been done or laughed at or experienced that you should file away and have a wee laugh about it to yourself, or a cry or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Carpe diem, seize the day, from Dead Poets Society. There was a colleague of mine who sadly had a heart attack and died a number of years ago now. But Brenda was from Shotts, and she was brilliant woman, absolutely super clever. And she said, no matter where you are in life, these are the good old days. And she used to say that in front of the staff room when everybody was, in a busy secondary school, when everybody was tearing their hair out at various times in the year. Folks, these are the good old days. And she was absolutely right. So what you're experiencing just now, you may not think of as the good old days. And there were many days as a carer where I definitely wouldn't have said, this has been a good old day. But you do have the days where, the clouds clear and the sun comes out briefly. And those are worth sharing, and they're worth celebrating, and definitely park the memories for those. And take a sense of achievement, a sense of pride in different activities that you and the person are doing, whether it's pottering in the garden, whether it's going for a coffee, whether it's meeting up with other people. If you've got access to a car and you go out for a drive, watching TV programmes together. Alison loved Spring Watch, because she wasn't particularly into nature, but she just loved all those wee animals and the stories and whatever, or location. You end up watching, I know, you end up watching TV that you might not normally watch. I draw the line at the Masked Singer or whatever that nonsense was, but anyway, she got a thing for Channel 4 News, and she had the hots for the weatherman at the end of Channel 4 News, Liam Dutton, and she just loved Liam Dutton. He's so cute, and I'm like, what about me? Don't forget me. So anyway, favourite foods, I mean, indulge, because they don't come back. Alison used to love a Magnum ice cream after, not a Magnum of champagne, I should add, a Magnum ice cream after her evening meal, and that was her treat for the day. Even if it'd been out, even if it hadn't, whatever, she got a Magnum. And these are the wee things that do make a difference at the time. Singing and dancing as well. And I gave up worrying about what the neighbours were thinking with the music playing and us dancing in front of the kids coming home from school, the neighbours and whatever. Big deal. Alison loved music, and I impressed on the care home that there should always be music with her, because it always stimulated her throughout her life. And I'm glad to say that when she faced her final days, there was music on in the background. So yeah, if you can still go to the day club activities, the dementia-friendly events, art galleries and museums and whatever, you can get, if you're in a position to go out and do that, great. And if they can no longer do what they're able to do before, big deal. They're still the person that you love and have loved for, in our case, it was nearly 40 years. Whatever they can do, they can still achieve, they can still make you proud, and I'd still take great happiness out of the memories of that, because you wouldn't believe how much you're going to miss the person you're caring for. And it's a hard message, but it is really true. It's tough when they're gone. It is a huge responsibility to act as the eyes and ears of another person, previously independent, as my wife definitely was. But as I mentioned, self-care is for both of you. You're not alone. Go to the meetings, use the technology you're all using today, get as much help as you can, meet up with friends and family, make new friends. I mean, I, as a male carer, made two of my best friends now are folks that we met up with through events, the dementia-friendly events and so on. Last word would be, you're doing the right thing, and you should really take pride in that, because you'll look back and be glad that you did care. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Des. That was a really lovely insight to you and Alison's relationship, and thank you so much for being open and honest about it and telling us all about it. And I hope that that's helped everyone think about some of the things that could be helpful for them going forward. And I'm sure many people can identify with the experience. So thank you very much for that. Okay, right, we're now coming towards the end of the webinar. So this is the kind of point where we like to give you the opportunity to do two things for us. So I'm hoping if the chat box is working, Gillian will be able to put in the link for the Jamboard. So basically the Jamboard is a kind of post-it note kind of whiteboard where you can put in hints and tips, and it'd be really great if you can follow the link to that, and just put in any kind of hints and tips that you might have yourself that you think would be helpful for other carers as well, thinking about some of the things that Des has spoken about, maybe some of the things that you've experienced yourself, or some things that have helped you as you've been going through this experience. It'd be really great if you could add them on to the Jamboard. If you're struggling for whatever reason or you can't manage it in any way, then if you just pop them in the chat box, we can transfer them over. That's absolutely fine. But it's also an opportunity, if anyone's got any questions or any comments they want to make to any of the speakers today, then yeah, it'd be really great if you would ask away now. So you can either just put your hand up if you want, because there's enough of us here that I can see. Just put your hand up if you want to ask a question, or just come on and if they've got any comments or questions.
Amanda, I'll just mention I've popped the link to the Jamboard into the chat box now. For anyone who does want to go into the Jamboard, all you do is click on the link and it'll take you into a new page. It's basically an interactive whiteboard. So on the left-hand side of the screen, if you go 4 icons down, you see a little square with a turned up corner. If you just click on the square, it pops up with a sticky note, and you just type in your message and press save, and it'll automatically pop it into the Jamboard for you. you'll see when you go in there, it's about advice and information sharing from one carer to another. So it's a really kind of peer-to-peer space for you to share any hints and tips you have around your own experiences that you think other people would benefit from knowing. Again, as Amanda said, if you're not comfortable using that, please don't feel that you have to. The chat box is live as well, so we can quite easily put it through. Yeah, chat box is working. And I also want to say, wonderful presentation, Des. Thank you so much.
Has anyone got any questions or any comments they want to ask or say? Yes, Alice, hi.
Just want to say thank you very much. It's been a very, very worthwhile afternoon, and I've appreciated Des's comments and his story of the journey. And I think it's very useful for us to know that other people in other areas have different problems to the ones we have. And one of my problems is that when I go into the care home and ask staff about the visiting, I get different answers from different people. And it's very difficult to find a sort of a modus operandi, if you like. One says, oh, you can only have 2 visits a week and you've got to be designated and you can only have an hour at a time. And another one says, oh no, I think nowadays you can come in anytime you like. And another one says, yes, you can come any day you want, but you've got to give us 24 hours notice. I mean, how do you fence that? I mean, which one you go with one? And I accepted the one girl said I could come in any day that had been relaxed, and it was now possible because I was the one who was designated. I could go in when I wanted to. And I went in and I was challenged with, you haven't booked for this afternoon, so you really can't come in. And that's quite tricky, but I don't suppose there's any solution to that at the moment because things are, as you say, changing. But there's no way around that, is there?
I think we can come to Lorna, because you probably had that on the hill. I think that's probably, Alice, that's probably the #1 issue that is across the board at the moment, because the guidance has been given out, but that's just the thing, it's guidance. It's only guidance, so it's open to interpretation, and different organisations or different care homes implementing it in different ways. And I think that's the main issue that families have faced, is that they just want a clear, you know, decision once and for all. What is it that's actually happening? And there's no difference. And like that, sometimes you can find someone who doesn't have any problems at all and gets in no problem at all and can do that, and then you get other people like yourself who are getting all different you know, pieces of information. It really is really confusing. So I think that's probably that's the #1 issue that comes up time and time again. I don't know.
Okay, thanks.
And I think, Alice, what we've been finding that is exactly what the staff are doing, because like it's the same as Alzheimer Scotland staff. People don't have time to read that lengthy document of guidance and the updates. So we always go to either a senior charge nurse or a care home manager and to ask for that kind of fit. And we always kind of, anything that we do is followed up either by a phone call or an email, depending on what the initial contact has been, so that we've got it there in black and white. So you'll find that staff in their hearts, because and I know they kind of have a feeling of they're no family, but they're ultimately, they are caring for your loved one. They want you to get in. They're not caring, because it seems to be hierarchy that seems to make the harsher decisions, because staff that we spoke to have said families are actually an asset to have. And it seems to be the care home owners or the care home managers that seem that's not necessarily the case across the board. So definitely just kind of speak to the care home manager and get it like what it is that's right. I would like to go with the staff member that says you can get access anytime, any day, because that's exactly what we should be working towards.
Thanks.
Has anyone else got any comments or questions for anyone? Norma, hi.
No, I was just going to ask, it was just really about the family involvement plan within the toolkit, is how aware care homes are of that, what's been kind of done to communicate to them, and what the kind of response has been really.
Yeah, that's a great question, Norma, and I probably should have included it in the presentation, but we're working hard over the last couple of weeks and into the rest of this month is really about the kind of promotion of the toolkit. So I've been in contact with both the Care Inspectorate and the SSSC and in NHS Education Scotland as well. So I'm trying to work with all 3 bodies at the moment, because that has the most coverage, both in terms of inspectors who are doing inspections for care homes. So I'm trying to get as much awareness there, so that if they are inspecting a care home, that they can recommend using the toolkits, or if there's a care home that's maybe particularly struggling in that area, that they can help to do that, and also help to kind of use that to improve some of the staff care as well by using the toolkits, and also in general with the SSSC, again, just about giving that awareness of the toolkits for social care staff in general. So anybody who might be coming into contact of and working in care homes, that they know the toolkit's there, and then we will be releasing the sessions where we do some training with them as well, so that we can have time to sit and talk through some of the different scenarios with the staff, just so that they get really used to how to use the toolkits, and also from our perspective as well, so that they know about the family involvement plan. So if they then are starting to maybe have a conversation with a family who doesn't know about it, they can recommend it to the families as well. So I'm trying my best to get it out as widely as I can, and through other kind of government areas as well. And the plan will be that when we get to the next phase and we have the next toolkit for people who are about to make that decision, at that point I'm getting support through the Chief Social Work officer, and also the SSSC with the newly qualified social work programme as well, so that we can try again and embed it from the very beginning as well. So it's just going to really be a lot of that kind of promotion and awareness raising as much as we can throughout the next couple of weeks and months, just so that people start to get used to it. And again, we'll do the same for families, so anywhere that we can get that kind of awareness amongst, you know, carer centres, places where families might be, then we'll do that as much as we can, so that hopefully people know about it and are able to use it, and get those conversations started, and hopefully find that way to really feel part of the care of the person, because I think that's really important. That's really what it was the number one thing that came up because of the lockdown and the restrictions, that people just felt like that. I think they felt that it wasn't, and that for me is the most important thing, is it wasn't really valued. They felt it wasn't valued because it so just was cut off, and it was as if that doesn't, like what they contributed doesn't matter, if you know what I mean. And that's why it was that really harsh way of describing you as just a visitor, because people just imagined, oh, you just popped in for a cup of tea and that's all you did, when people did so much more than that. And so it was important to find a way to have that written down and really quantify, to say there's actually a huge contribution that people are making towards the care of someone, and also just give people the choice as well about how much you want to be involved and what kind of things you want to do as well. And we're also trying to encourage other disciplines, so like AHP, so whether it's physio, speech and language, and so that they can be part of that family involvement plan as well. So say, for example, if there's particular exercises that a physio might have recommended for the person that you care for living in the care home, but you would like to be part of that, then that could be part of the family involvement plan, to say that you're going to be doing those exercises, or, you know, that kind of thing. So it's just a different way to hopefully try and do that. So yeah, we're going to try as much as we can to get awareness out there as much as possible.
Yeah, I think, you know, that's good. I think if care homes see it, that actually this is going to benefit them, rather than, you know, here's another thing that we have to do, or another, you know, we've already got a care plan in place. But actually, you know, when the bit in the form where it's saying about, you know, what's important to you and what matters to you, well, actually, you know, what matters to you is going to benefit the person that you love and you care for. So, you know, if you say, well, actually, you know, I would like to be able to come in and help with a meal, or I would like to come in and help with such and such, hopefully the staff are going to say, well, that's really good, because that's going to take some of the pressure away, and, you know, we could work together in the ideal scenario. I know that it's not always like that, and as they have been there, and it's, thank you very much, that there's a demarcation line and you've just crossed it, kind of thing. But actually, if the care home can see that there's a win-win situation here, you know, this is going to benefit the relative, but actually it's going to benefit us as well, and more importantly, in the middle, it's going to benefit the person who's being cared for.
Yeah, and that's why we came up with it in that way as well. So what we wanted to do was to empower you guys as the relatives as well, so you can take the family involvement plan and you can start that, you fill that in yourself, and then you can start that conversation. You can go armed with that and say, this is what I really want to do, this is what I want to contribute, let's have this conversation. So it means that you can take control of that situation, and you can go right in there and say, this is what I want to do, and then it opens up that conversation. And if you feel like maybe there has been a deterioration in those relationships over lockdown, and you feel like maybe there has been, like as Lorna said, one of the biggest fears is rocking the boat, and relatives don't want to go in, and in the toolkit we talk about changing the language and not saying you're complaining, because I think sometimes when you say you're complaining or raising an issue or a concern, that sets up conflict between you straight away. So I think that's why we've given you hints and tips on how to safely ask questions, start conversations, so that you can still get what you want and still get that outcome, but it stops that kind of conflict between you and the staff member, or it just helps you to have those kind of conversations. And equally with the toolkit for the staff, we've tried to help them as well, to not be frightened about having those conversations with you guys as relatives, and also to be honest if there's things that they can't do, and just be more like communicating, open it up more and just talking about things. And if there's reasons why things can't happen, as long as they explain to you. I think that the problem is a lot of time you're just told it's not happening and there's no explanation why that is. So if they're able to tell you about the reason why and look for an alternative, or you know, those kind of things, it's just giving you hints and tips from both of you, from both parties, to be able to have those conversations. And that's really what we're kind of hoping the toolkit will do. So hopefully it will do that for you.
I think one of the biggest advantages of this toolkit is if you could put it in the hands of people before they begin the troll of care homes, because you don't find out anything before you go in. You're picking up information as you go through, and that's not always helpful, not always the best way to do it. And there's a great lack of foreknowledge being offered to people like us. You know, when you go to ask about something, there's not a great response. I haven't found them very responsive in giving you information before they actually have to. And to have that toolkit before you have to get involved in comparing home with home and like with like, that would be a great advantage to carers potentially looking for a care home for their loved ones. So thank you very much for that. It's very useful.
No, that's great, and it's great to see that, Alice, because that's what the next phase is, because we knew that, as Des said, it's such a huge, and you'll all know that as well, it's a horrible decision to have to make, and people are filled with doubt and guilt, and sometimes people feel that they've failed if that gets to that point. And I think it's about saying, do you know what, care homes are a positive choice. That can be a really great thing for your relative to have that level of care, and that you can do it together and in partnership. And as you said, I think if we can help people right at the very beginning to be in control, and again, it's about giving you that kind of power back to be in control of those situations, to be able to ask the right questions, to be able to say from the very beginning, you know, if my loved one moves into this care home, this is what I still want to be involved in. Let's talk about this now, rather than wait and you worry about how am I going to get myself involved in their care. So that's really important as well. And I think the other thing to say to you all, because we've talked about it a little bit today, but we don't really have as much time to go into it, and it is quite a kind of, you know, tough subject to open up, is about the kind of grief and bereavement round about those decisions. And also just if your loved one's been living in a care home over this pandemic, there'll be a lot of times where you will have felt a lot of anger and sadness and pain and fear and all those emotions as well, and maybe you haven't always identified it yourself as that's grieving that you're doing because the person's still living. So it's important for you to try and think about where those feelings come from, and once you identify them yourself, it is a difficult thing to do and it's a painful thing to do, but if you can do it, then you can start to manage the feelings. And that's what we've done in the toolkit, is give you some hints and tips about how to do that. And we've also got some sessions that we run at Tide as well, round about living grief and bereavement. We've got lots of resources on our website as well, so it's really important that you seek out that advice and support to help you, because, you know, as Des said, there'll be times where it is tough and times where you need some help and need some support. And I think that by doing that in that specific area and thinking about it in terms of grief and giving yourself that time to go through that process, that'll really help you as you're going through that kind of whole entire journey.
Sorry, I would absolutely concur with Alice. It's almost like you're terrified of making the wrong decision, because you know it's not a decision you want to make in the first place. It's not irreversible. But for somebody like dementia, somebody with dementia, if you get it wrong, the impact on them is potentially huge. So if the toolkit can be aimed, and I haven't seen the toolkit and I will have a look at it, but if it can be aimed at reversing or removing that particular fear, then that's going to be a big help to people going forward.
Thank you. Okay, well everyone, we've come to the end of our webinar today, so I just want to thank all of our speakers for coming along today and giving us their presentations, and Des in particular for being so open and honest about your experience. That's been really helpful. As I said, we've recorded the session, so you'll get an email probably tomorrow from myself that will give you the link to the recording, and I'll also give you the links to the toolkits and to the action on rights helpline and all the information around about that. And then we have our next and last webinar in this series is on the 23rd of this month, and it's round about building confidence for carers coming out of lockdown. So again, if you've not already registered or contacted me for the link for that, then please just send me an email and I'll give you the link for that. I would really like to see as many of you there as possible on that day, but we'll also be recording that in case you can't make it along. We'll make sure the links come out for that as well. So thank you very much everyone for coming along, and I hope it's been helpful for you, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. See you all soon. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.